Welcome to Candid Conversations on Leadership. Candice, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Candice Solomon-Strutz. Currently, I am the Director of IT Partners at the College of Applied Health Sciences. I've been on campus for a little over 20 years.
Hey, great.
How about you, Chris? Who are you?
Yeah, I'm Chris Tidrick. I'm the Chief Information Officer at the Geese College of Business, also the Senior Director of IT Partners at Geese. I have been on campus now for about 31 years.
Congratulations.
Thanks. It's been a long time, absolutely. So we were having lunch a few weeks ago and got in some really deep conversations about leadership. And it just sort of struck me. I'm like, maybe we should be sharing these, right? Maybe these conversations could be really beneficial to other people. So I'm like, hey, Candice, do you want to do a podcast? And how did you react to that?
I thought, wow, you know what we need? Another white guy doing a podcast. No, what would be great is doing this podcast, because I also had those same ideas. And I thought I would love to talk about our leadership lessons, things that we've learned and things that we've gained being in higher ed, and how best to share that with the hottest way that they're sharing media nowadays, which is a podcast.
Yeah. So do you listen to podcasts?
I do.
Yeah. Do you listen to leadership podcasts?
Sometimes,
Do
but
they feel the same to you in some ways?
they all kind of feel the same. They have a similar flavor. It
Yeah.
feels like I'm just reading a formulaic book.
So how are we going to make this different?
Well, we're unique and we have our own stories. We have our own experiences, but we're at a University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and we have such a different perspective being in higher ed that I think a lot of people can attach to. But at the same time, we also are living and breathing in this world. So there'll be current events that we can also draw from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've known each other for a really long time, and so we have a comfort level that we can dive a little deeper into some of these topics and maybe below the surface a little bit, so that it really is more meaningful to people.
I think so.
Okay, fantastic.
Awesome.
So really looking forward to doing this with you.
So
We're
excited.
hoping to have a bunch of different episodes. This is episode 1. And to start episode 1, we really thought, hey, let's talk about our leadership journeys a little bit, let people know who we are, where we've been, and maybe what leadership is to us. So Candice, you want to kind of jump in and tell me your leadership journey?
Yes, I will definitely kick us off. So I think I'm going to share 3 different leadership lessons that I learned along the course of my life experience. So let's take us back to the late 90s. I was an eager, almost 18-year-old here at the University of Illinois freshman year, and it was a good time, had lots of fun. About 3 weeks into this wonderful, fun time, I collapsed on the floor of Chem Annex in my chemistry lab. I know. And I was having a little bit trouble breathing, other things. I felt a little bad, so I went to McKinley about a week earlier. They gave me a cold pack. I thought nothing of it. Eventually, I had to be rushed to the emergency room. So I get to the emergency room. The oxygen levels, as the doctors checked, were extremely low. They did some x-rays, and guess what? They said I had a collapsed lung. It had been collapsed for they don't even know how long, but it was dead tissue, and I was going to need major surgery. They were saying things like tumors and other things, and I'm sitting here like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, how did you react to that?
I was flabbergasted, to say the least, because I was like, what is happening?
At 19.
I wasn't even 19.
Oh, yeah.
I was 18. So I called my mom, and I say, Ma, I'm at the hospital. She's like, oh, okay. So she comes to campus, and I could tell that she was distraught, but not because her firstborn was in the hospital, but something else. And she shared that my grandmother had died.
That day,
my grandmother had died.
What a day.
That was also my 18th birthday. Let's talk about worst birthday ever. So it's happy 18th birthday to me. Grandma's dead. I have to have major surgery. So we go ahead and decide that we're going to go to the south suburbs so I can try to bury my grandmother and things of that nature. The surgery, there were complications. They had to take out my entire lung. You have 2, so that's great.
Yeah.
But they did some testing, and the tumor that they found that closed off the upper bronchus was benign. And I was like, yeah, great. But I had to, because the surgery took so long, and I missed the funeral, I missed other things. I had to medically withdraw from school. Now, this was big to me. Education was big to me. I had a full, scholarship. I'm doing all these things. I was student body president. I gave a commencement speech at high school. I was like, we're knocking this out of the park. And you're telling me I have to withdraw from school. I've got one lung. I was a little distraught. So the first leadership lesson that I learned really early on was to take a breath with that one mighty lung that I have, look for the good, and stay positive. So I said, Candice, you got 2 lungs. I got another one. This is great. I'm young. I can be really active. I can definitely, still do things. It's not like I have a death sentence. There was nothing saying that it was cancerous, so we're good. I also got back into school the next semester. So these were all positive things. So that was the first really important leadership lesson that I still do to this day. When I'm stressed or in crisis, I just take a breath. I think, what is the positive that I can get out of this? And then, just try to keep that positive energy
this
going.
takes just breathe to a whole new level, right?
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I want to continue about another leadership lesson, so I came back that spring term and I'm in engineering classes, and engineering classes on this campus are pretty challenging and daunting, but it was a really daunting task when I walk into DCL and I don't see anybody that looks like me. I'm one of the very few women that are in the class. There are not a lot of people of color, maybe one other Black person that I saw when I'm there. And there was this laundry list of questions that I heard all the time. They would say, are you in the right room? Are you in the right class? And this wasn't just from the students. This was from the teachers, like the person in the lecture.
How did that feel?
I felt like a kick in the pants. I'm like, yeah, I've been sitting here for the last couple weeks. But then we did a lot of group work when we do computer science classes, and it's self-assigned group work. Who even gives people self-assigned group work? And I would always hear, I hope she's not in my group. But it was interesting. One time I heard, oh, I hope she's in my group. I always wanted to date a Black chick. And I was like, oh my gosh, am I being too stereotypically loud or Black, or all these stereotypes that are associated with that? I didn't want to be labeled the angry, sassy Black girl. I just wanted to, be me. So I will say that eventually I started to question myself, am I in the right room? Am I picking the right major? Am I smart enough to be here? Then I had to throw that out the window. This was my second leadership lesson. I could not let other people define me. I had to believe in myself, know who I am, and then love that person. And this is something that I still do to this day. I'm in IT. I mean, I've been in IT for about 20 years. When I walk into the room, there are not a lot of people that look like me in that room. So what do? I keep it going.
But how do you do that? How do you sort of convince yourself, even in the dark moments?
It takes less convincing, because now that I know all the things I bring to the table, I keep that positive energy that I don't have to prove myself to any of the people in the room. I don't have to show my credentials or my title. I'm here. And if you have questions, feel free to ask.
Right, you've been around, so you have that reputation that sort of precedes you. What kind of advice would you give somebody who's younger in that same position?
I would tell them that being able to be self-aware of the things that they bring to the table is the first step of not letting people knock you down a peg. Because sometimes you actually may have a lot more to offer than that person asking those questions. They're just not used to seeing someone that looks like you in that level of authority.
That's a great lesson, great advice. Yeah. And you said you had a third.
I did.
Yeah.
So I will say that if we go back to when I was admitted to that hospital, there were individuals that came to visit me. So these students, I made lots of friends those first 3 weeks. And I think the last lesson is to invest and develop strong relationships. This is something that we can never, ever get past, but they came to visit me when I was in the hospital. I stayed connected with them when I was away. And when I got back, they encouraged me to do Taekwondo. And I was like, whatever, sure, I'll show up to a class. And I showed up, and I mean, lo and behold, I'm actually teaching Taekwondo classes now.
Yeah.
And I've, for the last 20 years, that's part of something that I do. It's a thing that I definitely focus on, but the ability to develop strong relationships has held true. So I want to say that whether it be teaching, because I've taught in the classroom, whether it be teaching Taekwondo, whether it be being a parent, whether all of these ways that I've had to make sure that I've connected with people has been integral to keeping the relationship going. So it doesn't feel false or fake. And that has been something that I use now in a professional setting or environment. So when people mention things, I want to learn more about them. I ask questions so that I can utilize that and really kind of built the relationship to another level.
So what is that relationship? What does that connection give you as a leader? Like, what's the advantage to it?
Well, one, I mean, I'm not even going to say the strategic, like, what is that phrase from relationships are currency, but the way that you work and interact with people, it all ties back to this emotional intelligence piece. It's not just about you, but it's about how we connect with others. And you have to interact with them in the world. And that is why it is important that you connect, but not just at a superficial level. I mean, I would love to explain it in more detail, but then I will go into too many stories. So what I would love to do instead is ask you a little bit about your leadership journey.
Absolutely. I think we both are going to have a ton of stories that we'll share over the course of the different episodes. So my leadership, I said mentioned I've been here for 30 plus years, and so my leadership journey kind of starts way back when. I mean, I came to this campus in 1993.
Oh my gosh!
And one of the first jobs I had was as a web developer. And as a part of that, I also was helping. I was working for Illinois Extension, so the sort of the outreach arm of the university, and we were just getting into social media. It was when Facebook and Twitter were taking off, and we were trying to figure out how do we leverage social media to get the word out about the great work that Extension was doing and get information into people's hands. And one of the other social media platforms, this was about I think this was January of 2012. And one of the new platforms that was coming out was Pinterest.
Oh my.
And I knew about it, right? I wasn't exactly the demographic for Pinterest, but I knew about it, and I thought this might be something that Extension could leverage to sort of get information out there, especially if you think about like gardening and home, things. So we're looking at that, and at the same time we had our big annual conference. And we were going to have a social media panel. We had somebody to talk about Facebook. We had someone to talk about Twitter. And there was nobody to talk about Pinterest. Nobody had been using it, whatever. And I said, you know what? I know enough about this. I can get up there in front of 400 Extension professionals and talk about Pinterest. And I did it. I was up there for like 5 minutes. I made people laugh. I made them interested in it. And it went incredibly well. Little did I know that there was the director of Extension was sitting in the back of the room, and he leaned over to his associate director, and they were in the process of looking for the first IT director in the history of Extension. But they were they had trouble. They had failed the search. They were having trouble finding one. And he leaned over to her and said, "You know what? Maybe he could be our next IT director."
Wow.
And I was just a developer, right?
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't
just
done
a developer.
I hadn't done any real leadership. In my understanding of it, I hadn't managed people. And 2 months later, I was the IT director of Extension. Wow. And so the lesson there is when you see a gap, when there's a need in your organization, one of the ways to sort of step forward as a leader is to volunteer to fill that gap, figure out how to fill that gap. So I call it the Pinterest gap.
Okay.
But that's kind of my first lesson.
Yeah, I will also see, I also sense there's that leaders are always kind of on stage type lesson.
Absolutely.
You never know who's in the audience. I can definitely get that.
Yeah, people are always watching and witnessing what you're doing. And when you step forward and sort of step out of your normal job description, that's a great opportunity for leadership. Yeah. So the second one is, so I got this job as the IT director for Extension. And this is what I kind of call my leadership by the seat of my pants phase of my career.
Let's hear.
I didn't really know what I was doing. I think I had pretty decent leadership instincts. I had good relationship instincts. I was a good communicator. I was pretty confident in what I was doing. But I also had really no real idea of how to be a leader. It was pure instinct. And I had the opportunity to, over the course of like 2013 to 2014, go through 2 leadership programs. One was here on campus, and one was something that was associated with the Big Ten. And I learned all of these different leadership lessons and tools. And all of a sudden, I'd find myself sitting in the professional development sessions and going, "Oh, that thing they're talking about, that's what I do," right? And so I had an academic, deeper understanding of what it was. And when you have that academic understanding, you can then be intentional about applying it. And that becomes so much more powerful. I almost describe it as I learned how to watch myself leading, and I could sort of understand, I could see what I was doing and how it was landing with people, and I could adjust it on the fly because I had that great understanding. So like really learning about leadership is one of the, I think, really important things for leaders to do, not just to do it by the seat of their pants. And then I mentioned I had confidence.
Yes.
And this gets to lesson number 3. And I have 4 lessons. I have one more lesson than
That's
you do.
okay.
But
You're older. It's good.
I mentioned that I had confidence.
Yes.
I still have confidence. I will probably die with confidence. But what I realized as I went through some of these programs and as I started interacting more as a leader, I kept getting feedback from people like, you're a little on the arrogant side. Your confidence isn't creating enough room for people.
How did that make you feel?
It was tough to take. I mean, it was when some of that feedback came in like a 360 feedback review survey that I did, and so you get this entire document of all of these things that people say about you. Incredibly valuable. I highly recommend it to anybody.
Yeah.
But
you're ready to cry.
But it is, right? It's hard to sort of hear that when you feel like you're doing a great job. It's hard to hear that kind of criticism of you. But it's really not criticism. It's constructive feedback for you. And I'm like, okay, well, what's happening here? Like, why am I making people feel this way? And then in one of the leadership programs I was in, the cohort had an opportunity we were like around a table, like 6 people, and we were told, give somebody at the table feedback about themselves, like to their face.
Okay.
Like, and it's a nerve-wracking experience. And one of the women in the cohort, who I will like be thankful for till forever, she looked at me and said, "You are so good at what you do, you're intimidating." I was like, what? Okay. I kind of understand the arrogant thing, but like intimidating? Like, how could I be intimidating? And this, about the same time, I was trying to like figure that out, and that bothered me. Like, I didn't want to be intimidating. Like, I want to be a person that is approachable, and about the same time, I saw Brene Brown's TED Talk on the power of vulnerability.
Good TED Talk, by the way.
A fantastic TED Talk. It's one of my favorites. Highly recommend it. We may even put it in the link description on this because I recommend everyone take a look at it. But in that TED Talk, she talked about how being vulnerable as a leader is kind of table stakes for leadership. That you have to, that's the way you connect with others. That is the way that you build trust. And I hadn't really thought about that. And I think the reason why my fellow cohort members said I was intimidating and that I don't do everything well. Like, I'm not good at everything.
Right, but you weren't displaying that.
But I wasn't displaying it, right? The things that I wasn't good at, I either hid or acted like I was good at them when I really wasn't good at them, right? So I wasn't letting anyone into the space with me to say, hey, I can contribute there and I can contribute here. And it makes it collaborative. You're not inclusive if you don't show vulnerability. So that really has changed me. Like being able to say, I'm not good at this thing. I need your help, right? It brings everybody to the table. So to me, that's my 3rd leadership lesson.
Okay.
And then number 4, this was the hardest one for me.
Okay.
And I don't know if anyone's familiar with Clifton's Strengths it's one of these assessment tools like DISC or Myers-Briggs we'll put the link in the description here. But one of the Clifton Strengths gives you an assessment of your top strengths, and they have 34 different strengths. And when I first took it, one of my top strengths was called woo. And you're like, woo?
And what does woo stand for those that don't know?
Yeah, so woo stands for winning others over, right? And it's that ability to sort of confidently convince other people to take your point of view, right?
I'm very familiar with woo.
Yeah, it's an important, it can be wielded well, right? It can be a really important thing. And I loved the fact that I had woo. Anybody that sort of
most people that
been,
have woo
been
love
around,
being woo.
been around me, knows that I talked about my woo. But then several years later, and this was probably just maybe 5 years ago now, I took Clifton Strengths again, and my woo disappeared from my top 5. My woo dropped all the way down to 15 out of 34. Like, it's like middle of the road. Like, and I was crestfallen. I was like, what happened to my woo? And it was hard for me to think about, I don't have my woo anymore. Does that mean I'm not influential? Does that mean I can't convince others?
No.
But what I finally realized is that I didn't need it anymore. So it wasn't coming out when I took the assessment, right? I wasn't needing to use it because I had gotten to a point in my career and in my leadership journey where it wasn't about me anymore, right? The woo is winning people over to my side. And now my focus had shifted into a very people-centered, other-centered, helping others grow, helping the organization get better. It wasn't about advancing me. I had gotten to a point in my career where I was really happy where I was, right? I wasn't trying to climb that ladder. So my woo actually kind of receded into the distance, and I was able to focus on other people and then lift them up a lot more. And I think that it's all this sort of journey. Like if you go through my journey, it's all of this, all about me to all about everybody else. Yeah. And that is, I'll tell you, it's a lot more satisfying, a lot more fulfilling to sort of be people focused.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I know, speaking of a person that woo is in their top 5, and it will always be to this day, it's one of those things that you can definitely focus on yourself and others. But one of the things I think about the woo is less about me and more about asking the right questions to really develop those relationships. So if it still gets at a superficial level, then you can't really actually help the other individual. So I'm glad that you're able to realize that it's more about how do I help others and put them in the right roles or right places that they need to be versus just look at me.
And absolutely too, because before it might have been, I have an idea. I'm going to pull everybody along with that idea, right? It's my idea. I'm going to convince everybody we need to go along with this. Now I still have good ideas.
Oh yeah.
And I can still throw them out there.
But you don't have to be the superstar.
But I don't have to be the superstar. I can say, hey, put the idea out on the table and then say, help me improve this, right? Bring your lived experience to the table. And it just makes all the difference in the world. And you come to better ideas.
Yeah. Very collaborative.
Yeah.
Wow.
Fantastic. So that's our leadership journeys.
I know.
I think I'm really looking forward to doing this podcast with you, Candice. I think we're gonna, maybe open up some ideas to people, open up some doors, and it's gonna be fun.
I agree. I think that, regardless if your woo will move forward or not move forward, I think this is going to be a fun time. So I'm excited. Yeah, and we can't wait to talk about all the wonderful other leadership lessons we have. I have so much things to talk about in terms of self-care. I've got so much things to talk about in terms of governance. Like, there's so many things that we can talk about. So
yeah, really looking forward to it. So we'll see you in the next episode.
Okay.